Hey guys, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in, coming back and watching. I appreciate it. I do hope you're staying safe and healthy out there, my friends. If you're new here, my name is Jim. It's great to meet you. Thanks for stopping by. I make tutorial videos here on YouTube showing how to use various software products to adjust your photos. I'm always looking for creative, fun, interesting, unique, different, whatever. I'm just looking to explore my creativity and experiment and come up with stuff that's hopefully a cool tip or trick that allows you to create the photos that you want to create. So today I'm in Luminar 4, and this is going to be about monochromes. So if you've watched my channel for any length of time or just seen even a few of my videos, you'll know that I'm a big color guy at heart. Absolutely love colors. And one of the reasons I like them is because they can be kind of dramatic and moody and all that. Over the last, I don't know, 6, 12 months, whatever it is, I've started to get more into monochromes as well. And even though they lack color, obviously, they can be dramatic and moody and all that, of course, as well. And I do my monochromes in Luminar just as I do my color photos. But inevitably, every time I post a video about monochromes, somebody says, I like Silver Efex Pro better. And I get it, right? Number one, it's a great app. I've got it. I've used it in the past. It's a great app, right? It's by the Nik. It's actually by DxO. They own Nik Collection now, but the Nik Collection contains Silver Efex Pro. It's a great product. I just don't use it that much anymore because I do my monochromes here in Luminar, and I have found 5 different interesting, unique, strange maybe ways to create a dramatic monochrome, because you can do that in a Luminar, I think, just as well as you can do in Silver Efex Pro. Are they different? Yes. Is Silver Efex Pro a point product specifically designed for monochromes? It is. So is it better at it though? You judge. I'm not here to judge. I prefer to do it in Luminar because I do everything else in Luminar. Anyway, what I wanted to do is show you 5 different kind of weird, strange things maybe you haven't thought of to help you make a better, more sort of compelling and dramatic monochrome in Luminar. Let's hit it. Here's how I used to always start monochromes in any app, right? Lightroom, Photoshop, Lightroom, Luminar, whatever. I would go to black and white conversion or whatever the equivalent was in the other app, and I would say convert to black and white. And there you go, you have a black and white. And then I'd come over here to the light tool and I'd say, well, it needs a little contrast. Maybe I want to put on the highlights, maybe put on the shadows a little bit, maybe bump the whites, maybe put on the blacks. And really quickly you can get a pretty decent looking monochrome photo, and I like that quite a bit. But here's tip number 1, and that is you can do those kind of things, but I personally am of the opinion that that alone is not going to get you the dramatic kind of look that you may be looking for. And to be clear, I see the spot there, I see the spot over there, I think there's a couple of spots over here too. I'm not going to get them out in this video. You can do that in Luminar. I'm skipping over that. This is a raw file, as you will see, and that will matter in this video because of one of the tips that I show you is only going to be applicable to raw files. So let me get back to it. The first tip that I have is change the temperature. Here, let me show you. So I'm going to hit reset, and you see what a black and white looks like, right? So there it is in color. This is something that you may not think of, but if you change the temperature and make it some god-awful, kind of ugly, strange kind of look, and then come over here to black and white conversion, you're going to get a little bit different look than if you didn't do this. Let me just turn this off, right? So there's the black and white without the temperature change. With the temperature change, and there it is without. So you can actually come in here, and if you change temperature and tint, you will get a different look than you would if you didn't change that at all. So now you might come in here and mess with the shadows and highlights, maybe bump up the whites and blacks and pull those down. And doing that temperature change, in addition to some of these other things like contrast, etc., gives you a much more dramatic monochrome than if you didn't do it at all. Let me turn this off. You can see very different monochrome result. That's tip number 1. Okay, tip number 2 is that in addition to doing the black and white conversion, don't hesitate to come in here and get into these camera profiles. That requires a raw file. So tip number 2, you have to have a raw file, and that's where these profiles or DCP profiles come into play. So Luminar has a default profile, and I generally leave it there most of the time. But if you're looking at creating a monochrome, come in here and try this camera deep or this landscape or standard or vivid. Let me show you the difference between, I'm not going to use landscape, I'm going to use deep. Let me show you deep, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do the same kind of thing that I would normally do, and that is mess with the highlights and the shadows and the whites and blacks. And I'm just kind of hacking here, to be honest. I'm just kind of winging it, but I'm showing you how you can get a bit more dramatic monochrome by using these camera profiles. Let me go back to the default profile. There you go, right? So default, maybe that wasn't as big of a difference. Look at this one. Camera clear, camera deep looks really good. Yeah, landscape is pretty much a pop. Let's see here. Vivid, I think I'm going to go for deep. I mean, I think that makes a big difference between the default profile and the camera deep profile. It has an impact. Again, these DCP profiles only work or appear. You won't even get this drop down menu if you don't have a raw file. So if you have raw, keep that in mind. But that, again, combined with some of these adjustments here. And by the way, you can stack these ideas. So the first idea was to change the temperature. Well, what if I come in now and change the temperature? Look at how moody and interesting and different this monochrome is versus the one without the temperature change. Let me go back. There was no temperature change, but the DCP profile change, and here it is again. So you might come in here and change these, move them around, just experiment. Every photo is going to be different, but tip number 1 was temperature and tint. Tip number 2 is camera profiles. Try them both with your monochromes and see how much of a difference it makes in your photo. Okay, I'm going to hit reset there, and I'm going to hit reset here on black and white. The next one, tip number 3, is go jack up the colors. Go into color, saturation, and vibrance. Go in here. I'm just going to go all the way to 100. I don't have any idea what this is going to look like. In a color photo, it looks terrible. I'll give you that. But if you go and convert that to black and white, it looks quite a bit different, right? So let me turn off this color adjustment. There you go. You can see it's not a huge difference, but it is different. There's the before, the color adjustment, and there's after. But here's where the fun comes in, is if you go into advanced settings, remember this photo, go back and look at it. It has a fair amount of blue, and it has a fair amount of orange, right? The blue is a little bit in the sky, obviously in the sign as well. Orange is going to be kind of on the left side of the building and kind of the pavement. So let's go into the oranges. Let's change the saturation level. Maybe go that way. Maybe pull down the luminance. Look at that big difference. Let's go to blue. I'm going to pull down the luminance of the blue, and look what that's doing to my sky, right? So maybe I want to increase the saturation, but pull down that luminance. And you can even try a hue shift if you want to see how that impacts things. I'm going to go back to the orange and try the hue shift as well. I kind of like it like that. So let me show you the black and white without these color adjustments. There you go. Pretty straightforward. Kind of boring, just literally a plain monochrome. With these color adjustments, much more interesting. Hey, on top of that, go back and try some of these other things, right? Adjust the temperature and tint, maybe change the contrast, maybe pull up the shadows in this case, maybe pull down the highlights. I don't know. I'm just kind of winging it here, but again, experiment with color. So temperature and tint, camera profiles, let's just try that deep one again. Yeah, that's getting really moody. That sky looks crazy stormy, and I love it. And so temperature, tint, camera profiles, and saturation, vibrance, as well as the various sliders here in the advanced settings for the colors. Those are the first 3 tips that can help you get creative and interesting and, of course, dramatic monochrome photos. Okay, we're back to just having a straight monochrome conversion, no other edits having taken place. And you might be able to guess this one because I've already shown you how you can play with colors here. There's another great tool for really messing with colors. It's not denoise. It's over here, and of course it's called under Color Enhancer. It is in advanced settings. It's called Color Balance. I love Color Balance. I use it a lot. It gives you massive amounts of control over the colors in your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. What do you think a monochrome photo is made up of? Shadows and midtones and highlights. So I would just come in here and start playing around and moving sliders just to see what I can come up with. And again, I don't have a particular plan with this photo. That was shadows. I'm going to go to midtones and just kind of play around. And again, it's all about experimentation and just finding something that sort of suits your taste. These highlights, I'm going to pop them a little bit. You can kind of see how this is working. Ooh, look at that. Now, keep in mind, I've done nothing to contrast or highlights or shadows In the light tool, all I've done is play with the color balance within the highlights and the midtones and the shadows. So once again, I would go back to the light tool, and here I would adjust contrast and maybe pull down these highlights just a little bit, maybe bump up the shadows. And if while you're at it, throw in some additional experimentation, play with that temperature and tint, maybe play with a camera profile. I've been going for this deep. That looks pretty cool and moody. That is not a look that I think you would typically expect out of Luminar. That's something that, like tonality, which is when Skyloom used to be called MacFun, tonality was their black and white tool. I used to use that a lot in addition to Silver Effects Pro, and I love tonality. It gives you some really powerful edits in monochrome, but look at that. I mean, that may not be what you think you would get out of Luminar with the monochrome photo, but using some of these ideas gives you the ability to kind of, for lack of a better word, go crazy. Because let's face it, with monochromes, you can get away with a lot more dramatic looking photo, and people are going to say, wow, that's beautiful, or that's moody. But if you show them a color version that has all these crazy colors, people are going to say, dude, you lost it. That's clown vomit, right? So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy that if you make a really over-the-top dramatic monochrome like that, people are going to say, well, that's really cool. But when I turn it back to color, you look at it and you're like, God, that's horrible, Jim. What'd you do wrong? So keep in mind that that's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to me. It's an observation I've had for a long time. People are okay with moody and over-the-top monochromes, but when you do it in color, people think that you've lost your mind. So those are 4 different ways. Let me show you tip number 5. Okay, back to my standard monochrome. No other edits on the photo. All I've done is convert to black and white. And by the way, I didn't even get into the basic sliders here in black and white conversion. You can do a lot with these. However, I also, or perhaps sometimes instead, like to do it up here in color. If you notice in color, you have 8 different color settings. In monochrome, you have 6, right? So you're picking up a little bit more range there, I think, which is why I often do it in color. But just pointing that out for you. The 5th tool or tip or trick for creating dramatic monochromes is go over to here, Color Styles, also known as LUTs. And within LUT, there's all these kinds of things, right? So you can click on any of these and get an interesting look, but I'm personally kind of enjoying using cross-processing. So this is something I used a lot in my in my work. Like I used cross-processing a lot in Luminar 3 when it was a separate tool. Now it's been bundled into LUTs, which I think fits fine. But I used to come in here and do a lot of these on my various videos. But you could come in here and get some really cool and interesting looks. I'm going to try this Miami. I'm going to increase the amount, and I'm winging it here. I don't really know what this is going to look like. I'm going to bump the saturation, see if that impacts anything. And let me show you the before and after. There's before and after. Not a huge change. Let me try a different cross-processing LUT. I'm going to try, Chicago looks pretty good. I'm going to go higher on the amount, and I'm going to go higher on the contrast. And that looks pretty cool. So here's the before. There you go, plain monochrome, no real enhancements to it. And with a color style or LUT, in this case, I'm using the cross-processing LUTs, but you could experiment with any of them. My point is, try that. And again, don't forget, go back here to the light tool and say, well, I like it, but maybe I want to play with these colors. You can stack these edits, as I've said before, and I feel like I'm pretty much always going to come back to light because it's got smart contrast and it's got highlights and shadows, which I feel like I'm going to want to experiment with anyway in my monochrome. But once again, a really interesting and I think dramatic monochrome done with, in this case, my tip number 5, which is the cross-processing LUTs. Now, while we're at it, there's 3 more. These are bonus tips. I'm not calling these out as separate things. To me, these are kind of incremental, additive things you can do to a photo. The first one is going to down here to glow, especially this soft focus bright. It really pops the highlights. That's idea number 1. Idea number 2 is over here on the portrait tab, and that's high key. And high key is often used in portraits, hence it's on the portrait tab. But you've got a lot of flexibility in here to come in and do some really interesting and kind of unique things with your photo to create more dramatic monochrome. So that's high key, and that's number 2. should say two. And the last one is split toning, and I've done this in a lot of my monochrome videos where I like to come over here and take the highlights into kind of the bluish realm to create kind of a silver look, and I'll often do the same with the shadows. So it's usually around 225, 220 or something, but create a little bit of a silver look. I like to enhance my monochromes with silver, so I do that with split toning, but there's before where it's really just a traditional kind of black and white, and here's split toning where it's kind of got that silver kind of look. So those are three little bonus things you can do to enhance your monochromes. The glow tool, specifically soft focus bright, the high key tool, and of course split toning. So there it is, 5 interesting, unique ways to really create dramatic monochromes, plus 3 little bonus tips to help you accentuate those. That's how I do it in Luminar 4, my friends. Lots of power, lots of control, and I encourage you, if you're making monochromes in another product, to experiment. Try them out in Luminar and see what you get with it. I think you'll be quite happy with the results. Thanks for watching, my friends. I had a good time doing this video. Hope you liked it as well. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you really soon. Have a great day. Take care, and adios.